we are going to begin on our starry night sky atop a city landscape at the bottom of the sky with a large square-headed brush and a mixture of yellow and titanium white. I'm using the titanium white on the yellow because it's going to ensure that it becomes a thicker pigment, and acrylic paints are very, very thin. They dry thinly, they dry so you can see through them, and when you paint on black, that can be an issue with yellow. So we add white to make colors more dense. It desaturates them, but we can re-add the saturation in later with additional layers, which we do. So anyways, from there, I then apply some orange and then a violet or purple on top of that. And I'm blending them all together, being very soft with my brush, and I'm doing so with a very light application. The lighter your application with your brush, the softer your blend will be, and the less streaky of an aesthetic you will render. I'm then taking a blue, a primary blue, and applying that on top of that as well. Again, being very soft. However, I do need to add more layers to make this look much more cohesive. So we let that dry, and now we're going back in again with more of the colors that we were using before. I'm just adding in that additional saturation that we lost when we added all of the white to our colors. And as you can see, it's starting to turn out into something much more cohesive. It's also worth noting that I didn't bring the blue all the way to the top. Instead, I do have it blend off into the black because that kind of acts as a vignette, and it's going to draw the eye inwards towards the center of the painting where we want it. You generally want the center of your painting or your main subject to be the brightest or most visually dominant piece of the painting, and that's easily achievable by darkening the edges. I'm then taking a medium-sized round-headed brush from Loft, applying a lot of water to it, a little bit of white paint, then I peel back the bristles and launch paint at the canvas. It's going to render a litany of stars. This also works great for snow, and it's great because it renders so many so quickly and ensures that there's a diversity in size in them, and diversity is something that's incredibly important in nature. Then, to create some really neat galaxy effects in the sky, we're taking a small square-headed brush. In a tapping and a little bit of a dragging motion, we make that black line in the center, and now I'm lining it with some of the blue that we were using previously. I'm applying it in a tapping motion, so from a far distance it might look like an implication of just a litany of stars, and rather than something kind of streaky, right? Then I'm going back to apply even more stars, and I'm doing it directionally, and you can do this by holding your brush very closely to the canvas and yet again peeling the bristles back and launching them there again. Then I'm going to go back down and work on the outskirts of my mountains with a medium-sized square-headed brush, again from Loft. It's important to note here that you want to render your mountains with a sharp brush, something that has a very defined edge. Square-headed brushes are fantastic for that. It's going to ensure that it really stands out, but sometimes you're also going to want your mountains to be in the background and be subtle. In that case, you could use a round-headed brush or something that's going to create a more soft, feathered aesthetic. With that being said, I'm now taking a very small liner brush from Loft, and I'm creating this plethora of little lights at the bottom of our mountains. And I'm trying to create different clusters of them, and I'm ensuring that each application is a little bit different from the one next to it. Sometimes I'm moving slightly horizontally, sometimes I'm moving upwards. But I'm always using a good amount of paint, and that's because, again, these pigments are fairly see-through because they are acrylic and we're working on black, and they'll be darker innately because of that. So here I'm also adding on some pinks, and I'm not trying to diversify the colors too drastically, but I don't want them all to be the same either. So we're using a combination of 3 colors, and just make sure they're warm colors, colors you might see in a house or at a stoplight or something of that nature. I'm also expanding my little village here out into a couple of areas, and the idea here is just to make it much more interesting. There are different places you can travel to, and it just helps build the story of your painting. When you're painting, you're really being a storyteller, and you want to captivate the audience, bring them in, and then let them experience all of it, go from place to place. And with that being said, here I'm now working on the water. I'm using very watered down pigment. It's a mixture of orange and pink, but because it is just so transparent, you're getting something much darker. You see the black underneath. I'm using horizontal lines so that you get that streaky aesthetic. And then I'm going to take another small square-headed brush and incorporate reflections in it. And I'm just doing this by applying very lightly with my brush at the top, then dragging it down, and as I drag it down, I try to blend it out so that you get this dissipating effect. It feathers off into the water. So all of these streaks of light are moving in the water as they should. They aren't hard edges through and through. It's not like there's a beam. It's something that moves and reacts and dissipates. So just try to ensure that it gets softer as you move downwards. I'm doing this initially with a yellow, as you can see. However, I do also move into a couple of additional colors, again, to ensure that there's that diversity and the reflection makes a lot more sense in the context of it all. Upon doing that, I realized that I wanted a little bit more of a city over on my left side of the screen, just to balance it a little bit more as well. And generally when you're painting, you want sections of threes. So here we have three dominant cities, and then we have a couple little connecting lights in between as well. I also leave a little bit of a path down near that bottom left-hand corner, just to add a little bit of interest, and again, it's a place to lead the viewer's eye inwards. Then I'm going to take more black, and again, fix some of the edges of my mountains. This is something that we come back to frequently. And if you're having an issue and you're getting a grainy effect, add a little bit more water into your pigment. It'll thin it, so you might have to do more layers, but you'll get a much sharper rendering of that which you desire. So that's important to remember as well. I'm then working on some mountains that are even farther in the background, and here I'm using a black, but I'm also mixing in a little bit of orange and a little bit of pink. And that's just going to make it a little bit brighter. What that's going to do is it's going to kind of imply that the light's surrounding it and it's still affecting it. So it's going to look more distant because it's blending in with the colors of the background more. If it were a blue sky, you'd make the mountains more blue. But because the colors of the sky are more pinks and purples and all of that, our mountains have more pinks and purples and oranges. However, I recognize that this aesthetic might not be for everyone. I know a lot of people like the silhouetted look. So I'm going to show you now what that looks like with a pure black yet again. It's very simple to go back over, and it's important to note that you can change things in your paintings. It's fantastic to go into it with a beautiful vision of what you want it to be and this great idea. But it's important to know that as you paint, you learn, you grow, you get additional ideas, and don't be wary of incorporating them. With that said, I'm now also adding more additional stars to the larger area of the sky and of course into the middle. Again, here we're doing it very directionally, and you can see they're shooting up in these vertical lines, and that's exactly what I want. Just get the brush very close to the canvas and try to aim. Might take a couple of tries, might want to try it on a separate canvas, but once you get it, it is such an efficient technique to work and render into all of your painting endeavors. So here, again, I'm just kind of fixing the mountain. I go back to this a number of times. As you can see, the edge wasn't as sharp as I wanted, but we fixed it. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to go back. And just don't get frustrated. Painting takes time, even if you're doing everything right. I really hope you enjoyed. It was a lot of fun. If you'd like to learn more, if you're new to acrylics, there's a link in the description to my book, Acrylic Painting for Beginners. And of course, I post every Saturday. I hope to see you next Saturday. Thank you so much for watching, and above all, stay creative.